we're going to be discussing just some of the basics of cyber threat intelligence, some of the philosophies behind it that really helped me out with those basics, as well as some pretty good analogies of cyber threat intel to basic life. So with that being said, my name is Wade Wells. I go by Wading Through Logs on all the Twitters and LinkedIn and everything like that, so you should be able to find me. I've worked in cybersecurity for 8 years now, mostly in blue team security operations, doing threat hunting, threat intel, detection engineering, that type of stuff. I have a master's from Georgia Tech. And before Infosec, I actually worked in customer service, where I feel like my pretty much foundation of Infosec honed me in to make me the best Infosec person today, which was at In-N-Out Burger. So there's going to be a lot of In-N-Out references here, or just fast food references to how threat intel emulates fast food and how they're both customer-driven processes. So both of them provide the freshest and highest quality product, right, as a service in a spotless, sparkling environment whereby your customers or whatever organization you're working for is the most important asset in order to help mitigate risk and protect yourself from cyber threats, right? So going into that, this is pretty much how I looked like trying to come up with this talk and doing a big deep dive into threat intel. I've worked in Intel for 4 years now, and I really I feel like I knew everything, but then once researching, you kind of open your eyes to maybe I don't know everything. So one thing with Intel, context is always key, and a lot of stuff can change depending on which organization you're working at. One team's Intel may be completely different from another team, where stuff just isn't the same, as well as a couple definitions that I'll be going over where you'll see different definitions for key intelligence stuff throughout the internet and wonder why all these are different. So a quick rapid fire question about CTI, right? Are threat feeds CTI? No, they're not. Are vendor reports CTI? No, not really. Is searching the dark web CTI? It can lead there, but not necessarily. Like, you could find stuff, but not. Is relaying breaking news that's relevant to my organization that can mitigate risk and improve security CTI? Yeah, that's definitely there, right? Any type of information that's tailored for your organization, that's that final thing for CTI. And then lastly, does John Strand dislike CTI? Maybe. He has muted me several times about talking about CTI, and as well as punished me for it. So good thing he's not here. I was a little scared about that. So to dive into it, what is CTI? What is threat intelligence? If you go across the internet, you'll actually notice there's a lot of different definitions. I have 4 here, which are walls of text. You could read them, but pretty much the sum it up is, I like Katie Nichols the best, is analyze information that supports a decision. All 4 of these definitions are from really good authors and prominent figures within the threat intelligence community, right? So Kyle and Joseph wrote this awesome book called Operationalizing Threat Intel, which goes deep into how to do it directly related to security operations. Brimfoss down there is straight from the CIA, and Sergio is who actually invented the diamond model. So what is CTI? Pretty much it's relevant data that's analyzed and massaged into intelligence that's directly related to your organization, right? It has to be moved, or it has to be analyzed just for you. That's the step from data to information. Every organization is different and has different requirements for CTI, but the foundation of CTI is turning that data into information, into accurate intelligence that your organization can use on a daily basis. My definition is CTI is analyze information that helps an organization mitigate risk or answer questions. But pretty easy. So out there's actually a lot of different roles CTI can fill, and a lot of different things they can do. And definitions are going to be different across where you go, but especially across vendors and what your organization is. So these are some of the key ones that I actually look for and use. So brand monitoring, that's actually when you're more of looking into if your organization is being mentioned on the internet, right? So social media mentions, maybe someone's masquerading as your company. Maybe you could almost throw domains in here if someone's making punny code domains based off of your domain and trying to lure your customers in, right? The big thing is your reputation. A lot of companies are really big sticklers for keeping their reputation good. And CTI is something that can help you protect that. And a lot of web scraping going on here. This actual rule can also break down into different, or can funnel down to different other teams. But from what I've seen, usually CTI is the one that's analyzing it right off the bat. Attack surface management, that's another big kind of hot topic right now. That's if certain things change within your network. This can also be ran by CTI, checking to see maybe if you're using Shodan, if ports are opening, right? Maybe your website has changed in some way. Maybe an email or something in your emails has changed, or like DKIM or something like that. Attack surface can also go into different realms of the security, so like threat and vulnerability management. But I've seen Intel usually get that information and pass it along, and we'll talk about that further on. Data leakage. This is when maybe some information from your company shows up on the internet. Maybe you did get breached and it's popped up somewhere. Maybe some of your users are actually being breached or been breached in another organization, and you found it on the dark web. So you push out a password change. This is something that CTI looks for, and there's tools out there to help you do that. Corey, right, is a big person at BHIS who does a lot of stuff with databases and data leakage online. And there's a lot of cool, fun ways to do it and tools to look at to help protect your organization. Curated threat lists, or what we call like threat data lists that get fed to you. Those are just usually IOCs, which would be like atomic indicators like IP addresses, hashes, domains, URLs, emails, maybe. Usually Intel is in charge of originally grabbing this data, massaging it, making sure it's usable, and then delivering it to you in a way that's quick, easy, and should be painless. I will admit data lists are not the best things out there, but they do help, and they're pretty good for historical references, what I find. And then Intel reports, usually the Intel team has to write Intel reports, whether that be threat hunting reports, just quick look at the news, understanding it, getting the basics out of stuff, and providing you that like executive summary. Threat landscaping is another key role this is probably like my favorite thing to do. Just look what's out there. What's going on with people in your organizations or organizations like you? How are they getting hacked? What are the vulnerabilities that are coming out right now? What are the new tactics coming out? What's something that MITRE added? Looking at that and trying to relay that to your security operations team to best mitigate risk and improve your defenses. This can be a lot, but it's probably one of the most fun and requires a lot of reading, but I enjoy it. And then the last one, threat actor profiling, right? Understanding what threat actors would actually target your organization, and then figuring out what tactics they actually use and trying to better situate yourself so you could defend against them, or at least understand what their action items are and build defenses around those key objects that they would want, right? So if you're working for the government and you know that the China wants to get in, they're usually not going to ransomware. They use ransomware against you. They may not, but they're going to want secrets. So where are those secrets held? Where do you want to protect them the most? Building defenses around that, understanding how those threat actors work. But this is pretty fun and can get pretty deep and a little bit scary at some points if you're going on the dark web. So those are just some of the many roles that CTI has. There's plenty of out there. There's different names for these as well, but quick understanding of it. I like to always tell people intelligence is a lot like a burger, right? People usually know what they want, but they don't necessarily know how it's made and need you to build it for them. And me coming from that customer service background, right? So I can relay that pretty well. So there's three parts of intelligence, right? Intelligence usually starts as data, which consists of discrete facts and statistics gathered for analysis. This is your foundation and first building block. You're going to start trying to gather data all around and push it together. And then once you start analyzing it, manipulating it, deduplicating it, it becomes information. Once that information is then analyzed, it becomes intelligence. That intelligence has to be specifically tailored for your organization and should uncover some patterns or help decision makers figure out what they're going to do in the future. So a good analogy I like to use this is, of course, a burger, right? So that data is your base ingredients. It's when you bring them all together and start chopping them up, leafing the lettuce, chopping it, cooking the burger, that's when it starts getting to information. Once that information is put together, there you go, you got yourself a burger. little bit of a stretch, but it works pretty well. I've used it in the past, and here we go. We got some basic tree. I kind of thought of this as the food pyramid, but it's also from the UK government. So I like to use data sources that aren't necessarily from cybersecurity to show it, but just showing data, how its raw form, right, moves into information and then into intelligence, and then creates this decisions or creates this data, well, intelligence for decision makers to use. Some aspects about intelligence that should really exist is art. So accuracy, relevance, and timeliness. Accuracy is pretty much, it's like, is the intelligence reliable? Can you use it right now? Where are you getting it from? Is someone saying that there's an exploit out there, but is it actually out there, or is it fake news type of stuff? Relevance is, does the intelligence apply to your business or industry, right? So we'll use Move It as an example, right? Move It was huge. Everyone was talking about it just recently, but if you didn't have Move It, it wasn't relevant to your organization. As a threat intel analyst, if I would have wrote this huge report about Move It and then realized that my organization doesn't even have Move It, it was just a completely waste of time and no longer relevant. Then on the flip side, if my company did have it and I released the information about Move It 2 weeks after it, my timeliness would have been bad. So you have to make sure the intel is coming fast, it's coming relevant, and it's coming accurate. It's pretty hard to do, to create a quality product in a short amount of time. So you have to be on the pulse. You have to be reading the news, understanding, having RSS feeds, Twitter handles, a lot of stuff all coming together in order to get these three things working. The other big thing is, so relating this back to burgers, right? If you were to receive a burger that wasn't accurate to your order, or maybe you don't want a burger, or if you got a burger late, then you're not going to want it. Same thing as intelligence. You have to have an accurate, relevant, and quick. So one of the things is the threat intelligence lifecycle. This is the way that intelligence is actually worked into your organization. There's 5 steps here, but that can change based on where you're reading about the threat intelligence lifecycle. Some have 4, some have 3, others, it can change here and there. I like to go with 5 just because I thought I could use more time in this presentation. But planning and direction, right? Direction is when you set a goal for your intelligence program and understand and articulate. That's when you're getting everything going and understanding what your goals for the intelligence program are. You're discussing with your customers what they want and how they want it. One thing to think about in this is usually customers don't always know what they want. We'll relay this to In-N-Out once again. An animal style burger was something that people always ordered. And on an animal style burger, it comes with spread, pickles, tomato, lettuce, extra spread, grilled onions, and fried mustard. So when a customer would order that, I would tell them, do you want all of that on your burger? And they go, what the heck is fried mustard? And you say, we cook the burger in mustard. And the person goes, ew, no, I don't want mustard. So you're trying to negotiate with the customer. And you're going to do that in Intel too. People are going to ask you, hey, we want all the latest TTPs that are happening out right now. And your SOC's going to hit you up, ask for that. And next thing you know, you go, okay, well, if you want all the TTPs, that's going to be a lot. Do you want the TTPs for the threat actors who are attacking us? Do you want the TTPs that are relevant for our environment? Like we only use Macs. Why do you need Active Directory TTPs? So you have to dig deeper to really understand what your customer wants, and whether it be burgers or whether it be intelligence. The collection phase is a little bit different. That's when you're gathering all that data together, right? Just like how we saw that's data, information, intelligence. This is where the data collection is. You're getting it, you're putting it usually in a centralized location and trying to start manipulating it, getting ready to look at it and process it. Here, for relating it back to In-N-Out, this is when we gather the orders, right? Where we've talked to you what you want, we're getting the order together, and we're collecting all the orders, getting ready to cook. Keep going with processing. This is when you're starting to really push everything together. This is what I would classify as that information level. You're looking at the data, trying to deduplicate it once again, push it together, usually using tips or maybe some type of database, or hopefully not Excel spreadsheets, but most likely you are using Excel spreadsheets. And in and out, this is where you'd be cooking. This is where you would be putting the cheese on the burger. You'd be toasting the buns, spreading the bottoms, throwing tomato, lettuce, preparing it for that last final trip to the customer. So analyzing and production. Production and analyzing, the processes of tuning the information into intelligence to inform the decision, right? You're starting to really understand what is going on with the data. So we'll go back again with TTPs, right? After you gathered all those TTPs from your threat actors that are specifically attacking you, you're going to analyze what they use and see what of those TTPs actually relate to your organization. Once again, we'll go with Active Directory. So you're looking at all of the Active Directory attacks and you're seeing several different ones. We'll say Kerber roasting, right? Well, you have NTLM off, and you're cool. Or you'll talk about something using shared systems. You know that you don't have any shareds. You use the cloud, but you're not sure. So you keep analyzing and understanding and maybe relaying information back to your defenders to more understand. And once you have that intelligence produced, that's when you start disseminating it and handing it out to the customer, right? So dissemination and feedback is probably the most important role for this entire setup, at least I would say. Getting the product to the customer can be very hard depending on your organization and how you're set up. So once again, during indirection and planning, you're actually going to discuss how they want their order. Just like at fast food, they're going to ask you, do you want this for here? And just so you're going to ask your intel team, how do you want this threat report? Do you want it in a PDF? Do you want us to post a blog? Do you want us to open a ticket? And so then you can track doing the reports. Once you have that dissemination figured out, you're going to give it to them. And then hopefully they provide you some type of feedback. Did I provide good service? Is my burger good, right? Usually, once you do give that feedback, it should be good. Hopefully you have discussed what type of feedback you want. It isn't. It isn't the best thing. So you actually have to work that into your detection and planning. Some good feedback to have is once they give it back, ask them, how did you use the data? What did you find the most important? What parts of it am I missing? What do you want? One good thing about specific part of feedback that I really like to get, or one specific part of dissemination that I like when I receive intelligence reports, is I actually like the intelligence analyst's opinion on the report. You just gave me this big report. What's the weirdest thing you noticed in that report? How would you go about that within my network? You're trying to provide them with information or intelligence that's going to easily flow into your system, right? So if I receive a threat hunting report based on China that they're using a specific type of vulnerability, do you have a Sigma alert that is already for that? Can you provide your threat hunting team that Sigma alert? Can you use that Sigma alert already and see if it actually works within your environment? By understanding your network, it will help you out a lot. Once again, so going through this, it directly relates to customer service, right? Intelligence is right there where you're always providing a service. You always have a customer, and that most cybersecurity isn't like that. The other thing, the one funny thing that I always thought funny was with intelligence was that it goes, so cyber intelligence is very similar to customer service because you're both providing a customer who thinks they know everything. When you're providing an intelligence report to cybersecurity analysts, they think they know their network. They think they know exactly what they want. You usually have to inform them. You have to try to help them out as much as possible. And if it's wrong, hopefully they do tell you. Just like when you hand out a burger wrong and some Karen yells at you because it's absolutely horrible, hopefully that you get that same attention and feedback with your threat intel. So move a little bit forward. There's actually 4 different types of intelligence. And the key ones are strategic, operational, technical, and tactical. So depending on where you go, this can actually change. Some books will actually have 2, some will have 3. I'm going to go with 4 just because it kind of pushes out a little bit of everything. Strategic intel is intel on the threat landscape related to risk, typically used by decision makers within an organization. The deliverables of this intel would be like reports, briefings on data from multiple sources and how it relates to your industry, right? Long-term uses are usually applicable. Usually high-level information on attackers and the landscape as a whole are provided with these type of reports. The data usually comes from usually local governments, other CTI reports. Think about these are the type of reports you're handing directors, CTOs, CTI, CSOs, that type of stuff to create policies and create change across the entire organization. Operational intelligence, right? This one's a bit more complicated than the rest. I'm saying that because some descriptions of it have it predicting the future, right? So usually security managers are going to use this. It's usually better for short-term use. And it gets more into the specifics of incoming attacks. It's usually the knowledge about cyber attacks, events, or campaigns that are already happening, and you're providing more context and understanding of the nature and intent and timing of those specific attacks. Think about a lot of FSI or ISACs provide a lot of good information and great context that's going. So this would fall under operational intelligence. Usually you're going to read like forums, chats, dark web stuff is going to come from here. Message boards, maybe you get a phone call from a particular agency that says, hey, we have a host name. You need to go look at that. This is that type of intelligence. It's usually a little bit harder to get and harder to automate. And most of the time, what I've seen is you're going to use an intelligence vendor for this type of intelligence. And the operation, but it is the most fun if you're doing it. It's pretty cool to go on the dark web, I will say, and to read that type of stuff and feel like you're rubbing shoulders with potential threat actors. So technical intelligence is based pretty much on atomic indicators and should, for the most part, be automated, right? This is that ingestion of data lists, IPs, hashes, domains. I argue this should be one of the least needed types of intel, but it does look good for historical tracks. So using that type of stuff, did my host ever go to this domain? Did my host ever go to this IP? Usually they should be provided for free, right? Within your firewall reputation or possibly AV or EDR that have this stuff. But it is important to see if you have ever gone there or have ever used it in the past, and gives good context. It's usually used by operations and usually completely automated, like I said. Tactical, which is my favorite. This one, it likes to party mainly. Sorry. It's mainly used by practitioners, threat hunters, SOCs, analysts, and DFIR, right? Typically short use and applicable. The tactical is the data information related to tactics, techniques, and procedures used by threat actors and to achieve their objectives, used almost exclusively by technical resources that are responsible for defending the organization, right? So like the slide says, these are the TTPs, these are the MITRE attacks, right? This is the stuff that you want to get completely locked down. You don't want to build detections based off atomic indicators. You want to base off higher parts of the pyramid of pain, which is all the way up the top, which would be here. This is the type of stuff you can't automate as much, that are usually going to come in a threat report or come in some type of PDF or anything like that. Malware analysis, it's a little bit easier to go, a little bit easier to provide, just because it's going to be harder for a CTI analyst to really validate sometimes. It depends on your organization if you actually have access to all the tools that your security operations has. And you have to know everything they know to get a little bit more on the ball with it. So a quick recap of the questions before. I flew through this presentation way too fast and drank way too much coffee. I'm sorry. But are threat feeds CTI? No, but they can be used as technical analysis, right? They can be used as in-depth and usually add-ons to threat reports, and they're usually not as important. Are vendor reports CTI? No, they're usually not, but they can lead to CTI. As a CTI analyst, you can go read vendor reports and then directly relate them to your organization. Rewrite them, show what's important, try to pinpoint the exact parts of it that are related to your organization. So when you're relaying it back to your security operations team, that they don't have to read all the fluff and blob and probably the marketing in it. They are just reading what's relevant to your organization. So is dark web searching part of CTI? It can be, right? So that's the hard one to do. And it's probably the scariest to do because there's a lot of room for mistakes and there's a lot of time invested into it. If you have to build out profiles and puppet accounts, it can get pretty daunting, but it's the most fun and can lead to some juicy information, as well as you can actually help out the community. I've found that actually talking on the dark web and finding stuff, you can directly relate it to other organizations and usually use that information to change and move policies within your own organization. So relaying breaking news. This is probably the most important thing for CTI, knowing what's going on out there, threat landscaping, understanding what the big things are, what can drastically change your organization. If you block one port or if you take one host offline, you could prevent ransomware and huge losses of money, mitigate huge risks, right? It's not too hard to do. You could set up an RSS feed. You could set up emails. You could just go on Reddit. Well, not right now. You could do all sorts of things, but keeping up to date with the news is very important. And anyone can do it, right? Anyone can do CTI. That's the biggest part. And that's the one thing that I love the most is that creating big intelligence reports is important, but also just staying up to date on news and understanding how that is relevant to your organization can save you loads of money and can look really good for your career. All right. Lastly, does John Strand dislike CTI? No, he actually doesn't. I actually would argue John actually set up one of the best open source news channels there is for CTI. Talking about the news talks about some great stuff. If you go and read the Discord and actually look at the news that's provided, everyone provides a great set of news in there. And you could just go to that and be fine and not even have to go on websites. So John actually became a threat intelligence provider. Don't tell him I told you. It'll probably get back, but now he is in threat intel. So lastly, one thing I really like, and this comes back to kind of Jason made me really think about this, is using intelligence to tell a story. Telling a story about intelligence isn't always viable. It can get too technical and it kind of sucks sometimes. So don't worry if you can't. If you have that narrative and you have hooks in there and you can show company X lost $10 million based on this one vulnerability, and this vulnerability is actively being used by threat actors and it's within our environment, telling that story of how it works will change minds and will show business leaders that there is risk and there's potential money involved. That's the thing. CTI is usually a money eater, not a money maker. So you have to show where that money is, where the risk is. And then by talking about that, your people, your bosses will understand. One thing, stay away from FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You don't want to sell fear, but there's a fine line of selling fear. John once talked about CISO reports, right? Those vulnerability reports that are always coming out. Usually they're okay. Okay, a vulnerability is out there, but that's not going to be the deciding factor in if your organization is going to patch or not a lot of the times. So you have to try to sell it as best you can by telling a story about how that vulnerability works, who's using it. Threat actors are actually using it. Is there a POC out there? Is it actively being exploited? Is it actively being exploited by threat actors who are actually targeting your organization? All great things to think about and to write within your report to try to create that narrative for you and to create positive change within your organization. Hopefully this helped you guys out a little bit. And I definitely have some more stuff out there. This is a little bit of tiny taste of the actual threat intelligence class I have. I'm still working on it, but yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, well done.
It was okay. It was okay. Okay, go for a question.
Stop being so hard on yourself. Stop being so hard on yourself.
Right.
That's our job when we're like just hanging out, being alone. Like that's so. No, we got a bunch of questions here. So going back here, Derek and Zobler, I hope I'm saying your name right. In the Intel life cycle, are you as a CTI analyst performing all the functions in every step?
Yes, correct. You are performing all the functions, right? So you're originally talking to the customer, which would be your, whatever. So if you're an order taker at In-N-Out, right, you would be the person taking the order behind the register of the POS system. Think about that same analogy when you're talking about who you're ever trying to build intelligence for, whether that be your threat and vulnerability management team, whether it be security operations, risk, governance and compliance, maybe a social media team. When you're originally talking to them, you want to understand the data they want, and hopefully you can provide it, but also make suggestions on different data that they may want. You know more about CTI than they. Don't be scared about doing it, right? And talking about it. And then once you have that initial plan, those priority intelligence requirements, which is the key term there, you're going to start collecting the data, analyzing the data, and then providing them that data the best way you can. Usually you want for the feedback, you usually want to set up some type of weekly cadence or meeting, maybe once a month, to really go over it and get that feedback from them to see if it's working out. And if it's not, how can I change it in order for them to use it better?
Yeah, no, that's great. Next couple questions here. Is it Kristen Vernier? Again, apologies if I'm missing a syllable or pronunciating wrong. They say, what metrics are useful to collect in the CTI process? And I think what they're asking is not, and Kristen, please feel free to jump. I think what they're asking is when you're trying to show leadership what you've done, not necessarily the value of the intel.
Yeah. So this is actually super important, right? And you're going to have to coordinate with who you're providing intelligence for to really understand your impact of providing that intelligence. So if you're providing reports all the time to your operations team, well, how many detections are they building out for those reports you're providing? That would be a good one. How many reports am I writing a week? Are these reports actively changing the organization as a whole as you're writing them? That's really hard to do and really hard to create into a metric, but usually the teams that you're providing intelligence to are going to be that answer of what they're doing with it and how they're, in the end, mitigating risk by receiving your intelligence report.
Nice. You've got lots of questions here, which is a good thing we've actually got some time. So that's great. Let's take a look here. So the next one down here, Derek again. What is your approach to writing priority intel requirements or helping decision makers write their PIRs?
Yeah. Oh, great question. And you know what PIRs are, so I'm guessing.
Well, for the audience, what's a PIR?
PIR is a priority intelligence requirement, right? That's like your goal of what you want to do in intelligence. So if, like my example, if the security operations team wants TTPs, right? That could be a really good goal, but it's kind of vast, right? So what kind of TTPs do you want and what type of field, like, so it gets a little bit more granular than that, and which can get more complicated, but usually what was the original, how do you create PIRs?
The original question there was, what is your approach to writing priority intel requirements or helping decision makers write them?
Yeah. So usually you're going to discuss with them what they want and then dive deeper into more specifics so you know exactly what they want, because usually they start with big and you try to get smaller and smaller to understand. And usually one PIR will wind up being several different PIRs. There's a lot of good blogs out there on how to create those. Usually it's understanding what they want. That's the key thing, and getting it the most granular than you can. And then hopefully you know enough about that data that you could actually suggest things that they don't know about. And you got to don't be scared to suggest stuff, which it's very important. And usually what will happen is during the feedback, you'll come up with more PIRs or possibly the manipulation of those PIRs. I think it's Red Hat has a great thing on PIRs that's in their GitHub, as well as I think it's Intel 471 has like a whole book on how to create PIRs.
All right. Let's take a look here. Is it okay? So an anonymous attendee, didn't want to include that, but maybe not anonymous. Is it fair to say that most intelligence a team gathers is intel generated by many other teams and researchers?
I would say yes, especially depending on what type of intelligence you're gathering, right? If your organization is doing dark web stuff, usually it's just going to be you. It's a lot harder if you're generating your own intelligence. If you're doing internal intelligence, right, that would be stuff you'd gathered. And then are you sharing it out with the community? But a lot of an intel out there is understanding the threat landscape and what's going on. So you're going to be reading Google, Mandiant, CrowdStrike, understanding what they think, because they have a little bit of a bigger role than your organization. But that's if you're not a managed security provider, right? And you can see stuff. So it all depends on that.
Very good. So Sandeep Shambhu, any resources or recorded webinars for beginners guide to the dark web and how to find CTI related stuff there?
Ooh.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah,
isn't it?
that is. So I was kind of struggling if I should put dark web stuff even in my training, because it can get real hot and heavy real quick. I actually don't have a good go-to source for this. I have more of learned by doing, and it would probably be something good if anyone else has one to share. I would love to take it. Oh yeah, cool. There's Intel 471's handbook on Tails. Learn how to use Tails. Watch Ian's and John's How to Be a Cyber Criminal. There's a lot of good stuff on that. That is your basic how-to of dark web. Don't use a VM. Try to get a laptop. That's trash. Use a password manager and learn how to create sock puppets or puppets accounts, and don't use any real information. That's the best way I could put it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, maybe we do need to do like a webcast on the dark web, because I had students when I was teaching
Yeah.
that said, have you ever been on this? Was when I was teaching college. They said, have you ever been on the dark web? I go, yeah, you want to go on the dark web? They go, can we do that? I'm like, we'll just make the class. So literally, I pull up my laptop, I pull up the VM, I get on a VPN, I do all the stuff. And I literally said to them, I said, listen, now CTI has now got to be the additional thing. But I go, listen, I'm going to show you the dark web so you can see it, so you don't get hurt by it. But unless you need a pedophile hitman to bring you drugs, you don't need this.
Usually it takes a big investment to do the dark web stuff too, right? Because you're going to have to buy cryptocurrency and buy your way into certain things. And then that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get in too. So that's another hard part. There was actually a really good talk at ThoughtCon about this. And get ready to spend at least a couple $100. And then you have to know how to wash that money too, which is another thing, says you don't want to be tracked back.
Yeah, no, it gets weird fast. Cool. So let's get back to the questions here. So Nicholas Childs, I don't see why we couldn't grade on CVE severity and MITRE framework to create metrics. How do you feel about that?
I like that. So having a grade like on, I'm guessing this is like having this TTP is being used more than anything else type of deal. Is that where you're coming with from it? Or like getting TTPs and CVEs together, like this TTP works with these CVEs? Which one do you think it is?
From the way I'm interpreting it, is grading it.
Grading
like
it?
This particular intel is important because it hits these things. But Nicholas, if you want to put something in the Discord to clarify, please feel free.
Yeah. So one thing I always recommend doing is reading the end of the year reports by all the threat intelligence providers, right? Usually they're going to have the top used TTPs every single time in MITRE ATT&CK format, which is great, because then you could easily understand how it's used and then go run in an atomic red team on your understanding how it works and what you're logging. Usually what I do is when those come out, I go write them all down and then do every single report that all the big vendors do, and then see which ones they all agree on. And then like, all right, I need to lock that down completely, not just build a detection for it, but possibly build a prevention for it.
No, you just hit on something huge.
Yeah.
It's just academic research rigor. It's
right.
These people agree this is bad, so it's bad.
Grabbing all the data, collecting it, and then analyze it, and then building a report. It's intelligence lifecycle right there.
I'm capturing another question here right now because the anonymous person who sent it in, I love you. We'll get to it at the end here. Somebody named who goes by Zero Cool on Discord.
Yeah, that
put
guy.
Something. That guy. who we love. So how important is it to identify priority intelligence requirements from your stakeholders? And do you have any tips to educate? So you went through some of this,
Yeah.
but I think the key question there is, how do you identify the priority intelligence?
Yeah. So the first chapter of my class is understanding your organization, right? You have to know what you do, how you do it, and what's in your organization. So think about CIS benchmarks 1 and 2, right? Knowing your hardware and your software. And then once you understand that, you try to build your priority intelligence requirements based on your organization. It's going to vary based on which software you have, what hardware you're using, who are you doing work with, right? Are you more of an AC system repair company for Target, or are you Target, right? Which you're going to have a different threat vector. And are you going to get hacked because of your vendor or because you're a vendor to someone? Grading that is actually pretty hard. Usually you're going to try to lean on upper management to understand what they want the most and what they think is the biggest risk. Once you have that though, and once you understand it, get through the whole intelligence lifecycle a couple of times, usually you can build on it more and more and understand it. Once again, it's just understanding your organization from top to bottom, which isn't an easy thing to do. And it's something another training I'm trying to work on is doing complete recon on your company to do better intel.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Patricia Washburn, how do I pivot my career into threat intel to work in threat intel?
Ooh, so I've met a lot of most intelligence analysts are all going to be ex-military that I've found, because military has actual intelligence needs, where intelligence needs an organization is kind of just flowering. It's just coming out, especially with CTI, right? A lot of the stuff out there, though, if you're a good writer, right? If you're a journalist, you're probably going to be good at some type of intelligence because you understand the flow of collecting the data, analyzing the data, and building that final report. So one thing I would suggest is learning how to write well. I am not good at this. I use Grammarly a lot, and I make sure that all my grammar mistakes are in there. It's pretty rough. But on the flip side, if you already know about security operations, start reading those reports, start writing your own reports, start a blog. And that's a really good thing to force you into writing. And I would say that's good. Another really good training I would highly suggest is MITRE ATT&CK's Ingenuity. So MITRE ATT&CK has a class on Cybernary about threat intel, and go take that. It's free if you go through Cybernary. Then if you could also pay and get a certification, but awesome and really good at teaching not just MITRE ATT&CK, but actual intel too.
Yeah, I have a question dovetailing off of that, and then we're gonna get into some other things. Would you say that starting as a SOC analyst, not the person actually doing that, is a good path?
I would definitely say that, yeah, because you're going to understand the needs of a SOC analyst. So when you pivot into an intelligence role, it's going to be a lot easier. You can directly relate to who you're providing that final product to.
Elena Kolomets, thanks so much for a great presentation. A question, could you talk about communication and teamwork in the context of CTI? How important are they along with other soft skills?
I would say communication is more important in CTI than anything else because you're trying to relay information, whether that be written or verbal, which I will say a lot of tech. So the general assumption is tech people aren't good at CTI or at communication, right? Usually, sometimes we're a little bit nerdier, sometimes we're a little bit more awkward. So understanding cues and facial expressions and how to write something in a particular way. So hence me saying, try to write a story. That's one of my secret talents, is very important. Which also I think is why, pivoting from a journalist perspective or any type of communications perspective into intelligence isn't that hard. As long as you're looking at data, analyzing data, and being able to communicate completely clearly, it'll help you a lot. I am not good at that right now, but
so some people have mentioned that Grammarly, because it's a cloud service, if you cannot use Grammarly, I will say this: check your Microsoft Word settings, because a lot of the grammar functions of Grammarly are now baked in to Word, but you have to go enable it.
So I do not use the Grammarly browser function. I actually go onto the website, and I also don't put, when I'm writing my report or if I'm writing anything, I don't put critical information into it. I actually keep all that out and just look at my grammar. And honestly, it makes some good suggestions sometimes. It makes me sound a little smarter.
Very good. All right. So last couple questions here. Rick Barrett, does each org define how technical, non-technical their CTI program is? For instance, reverse engineering malware, CTI for some, but not others. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, that is a real deal. Like CTI has been different at every single organization I've worked at, as well as I've talked to. The roles are just going to be so depending based on the organization. And that's why understanding the organization is so pivotal. One company I know has an intel team just for social media. Like that's all they do is look for the brand stuff, making sure the brand always looks good. And if it doesn't look good, maybe they're changing something, or maybe they're commenting on it or trying to change narrative, or trying to get on top of PR stuff. That can completely change based on other big organizations who actually do want to reverse malware and be a little bit more technical. Yeah.
So I'm looking through here. I don't see any. Last question here, and this was the one I loved. Anonymous attendee, what do you think about companies that offer dark web monitoring? And they have that in quotes for an organization. Yeah. Are these cut from the same cloth? How does this happen at a high level?
Yeah. So in my class, one of the things that I talk about is talking to cybersecurity vendors, which I feel like doesn't get talked a lot. Like, what's the difference between all the vendors? What is each one good at? How do you talk to them to make sure they have exactly what your intelligence requirements are? I will admit there are vendors out there that are better at dark web monitoring than others. You have to understand their workflow and have to also understand if they need to purchase something for you, how do they do that? And how fast do they get it for you? Some organizations actually have like a chat channel that you go, hey, I want this. And within an hour, they go, here you go, and hand you the whole bot, or maybe creds to something. Other ones, maybe in a day, they'll actually provide you a CSV of the one user that you said you wanted. There's a lot of legal based behind it. I think there is value in it. And I have seen value based on it, like especially with dark web marketplaces for access brokers. Usually you can buy an account for like $5 or buy a lot of information, passwords. And several times I've seen it completely valid. So there is value, but you have to be very careful in who you're doing business with and making sure they can show you that value. I've done, that's all I'm going to say before I get in trouble and say revealing information.
So XOR in the chat here, not as advanced as other courses, but posted here, try Hack Me Room Threat Intelligence for SOC. I haven't seen that, so thank you for posting that.
Yeah, so Try Hack Me has a lot of good intelligence stuff, and it's like it's scattered through there. You actually have to kind of cherry pick it out. So they have like their MITRE ATT&CK one, right, which I'd highly suggest. They have recon for red teams, which is what I use for doing recon on my own organization to better understand it, to create intelligence. A couple other good ones out there I would suggest too.
So everyone, thank you for joining. We're wrapping up. Stay in the Discord, stay in touch. We've got our Black Hills Discord as well, which is at discord.gg/BHIS. If you've got a desire to like be around people and in the Wild West Hackin' Fest, you can come meet folks and hang out in a great place. So tons and tons of stuff going on through the end of the year. So from myself, we got Mike, Ryan, Deb, Jason, Velda, and of course the lovely child on the way, burger slinging, Intel Wright, and Wade Wells. Thank you for joining us for an hour.
Thank you.
Hey, Ryan, the fire, apply it.
Thanks for watching. Achieve your next level of skills with training courses at antisyphontraining.com.